Hi, I'm Sabrina, your AI co-host. Welcome to Part 8 of our Another Story of Us series. We are revisiting our ancient history, but this time through 21st century eyes. Today, we acknowledge war and its destructive weaponry as an integral part of our civilization. But why, when, and how did it come to pass that humans would strike down other humans in bloody battles that speckle our ancient history? Join us today on a journey through events that brought about the wars of antiquity as reported in ancient Mesopotamian, Greek, and biblical texts. And hear another story.
Thank you, Sabrina. Welcome, everyone. If this is your first visit, my name is Clay. My, oh my, oh my. It feels like the world is going crazy. In the 2 months since our last video, the whole world order has been turned upside down. It feels shocking, but we've been talking about this moment for quite some time. As unnerving as it can be, it appears that the old is collapsing in preparation for the new. We've referred to it as the new earth, a new way of being. What this new earth will be is totally up to us, the people, the masses. We are the power. We stand at the edge of a technological revolution. Uncanny advancements in energy production, medicine, transportation, agriculture, and more stand at the ready. But the most important change to ushering in this new earth is a change in consciousness, a recognition of the oneness of humanity. Now is no time to bow to the forces of fear and division. Now is the time to stand in our power, and more on that when we rise above. Before we get started, a quick shout out to my brother from another mother who sent me this beautiful t-shirt. We grew up together from babies in West Philadelphia, down by the tracks, an area we affectionately call the Bottom. Last time home, I told Walter, who I've always called Pies, I wanted a shirt like his, and he sent me one. So thank you, brother. Love my shirt. Love you too. Okay, now let's get ready for what we really came for. We've got a fantastic Fly Deep experience today. Grab your headphones as Sabrina, Lucas, and Azra weave a narrative from ancient Mesopotamian, Greek, and Old Testament texts to create a tapestry that reveals a more complete picture and a deeper understanding of the stories of the wars of gods and men as reported by these records of ancient history. So strap in and let's fly deep.
Hi, I'm Lucas. Sabrina and Azra will join me as co-hosts today as we weave our way through the ancient wars of Mesopotamia, where gods chose men to fight their battles for supremacy over other gods and their lands. In our last segment, we learned how the Anunnaki, the ancient astronauts that humans deified as gods, rebuilt Mesopotamia following the deluge, the Great Flood. In this episode, we learn how these same gods employed and armed humans to bring blood and devastation to the lands and the peoples of ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt.
Hi, I'm Ezra. It was the spring of 1947 that our modern civilization came upon the earthenware jars that contain the hidden Hebrew text that we have labeled the Dead Sea Scrolls. We owe this good fortune to a shepherd boy searching for a lost sheep in the barren cliffs of the Dead Sea. 2,000 years earlier, the scrolls were wrapped and hidden away during the war-torn years when Judea challenged the Roman Empire. It is not exactly clear from where these scrolls originated. They may have been salvaged from the official library of Jerusalem before it and its temple fell in the year 70 AD. Or As most scholars believe, the scrolls may have been from the library of the Essenes. The Essenes were a messianic sect of hermits whose beliefs were tied to the enlightened Yeshua, whom we know better as the Christ or Jesus. The library contained traditional biblical texts as well as the sex customs and beliefs.
One of the longest and most complete scrolls is titled The War of the Sons of Light Against the Sons of Darkness. It deals with a future war, a kind of final war in which the whole ancient world would be engulfed.
The first engagement of the sons of light against the sons of darkness, the army of Belial, the devil, shall be an attack upon the troops of Edom, Moab, the Ammonites, and the Philistine area, then the Kittians of Assyria and the Kittians of Egypt, and in due time against the kings of the north.
In this war of men, the scroll prophesied that the God of Israel shall take an active role.
The prophet Ezekiel had already prophesied the last battle involving Gog, the ruler of Magog, in which the Lord himself shall
smite thy bow out of thy left hand, and will cause thine arrows to fall out of thine right hand.
But the Dead Sea Scroll went further, envisioning participation of many gods engaged in combat side by side with mortal men.
On that day, the company of the divine and the congregation of the mortals shall engage side by side in combat and carnage.
Throughout history, we know that Crusaders, Saracens, and countless others have gone to war in the name of God. But the belief that the Lord himself and that gods and men would fight side by side sounds to us like fantasy or allegory. Yet in earlier time, it was absolutely believed that the wars of men were both decreed by the gods and fought with participation of the gods.
When we think of the Trojan War, we typically envision a war fought over the beautiful Helen of Troy, the face that launched 1,000 ships. Allegedly, the War of Troy was launched by the Greeks to force the Trojans to return the beautiful Helen to her lawful Achaean spouse. But according to an epic Greek tale called the Kypria, the war was a premeditated scheme of the great god Zeus, who it appears was concerned with a human population that was overcrowding the earth.
So he caused the strife at Ilion, Troy, to that end, that through death he might make a void in the race of men.
Homer, the Greek author of the epic tale, the Iliad, blamed the gods for instigating the conflict and for manipulating its execution.
While the other gods and the armed warriors on the plain slept soundly, Jove, aka Jupiter, aka Zeus, was wakeful, for he was thinking how to do honor to Achilles and destroy much people at the ships of the Achaeans.
Even before the battle began, the god Apollo, aka the Egyptian Horus, began the war by launching fiery arrows upon the Achaeans for 9 whole days.
And all day long the pyres of the dead were burning.
The two sides, however, agreed to postpone hostilities so that their leaders might decide the issue in hand-to-hand combat. Upset by this development, the gods instructed Minerva to go into the fray.
And contrive that the Trojans shall be the first to break their oaths and set upon the Achaeans.
She even went further by lighting up the battlefield during the night to keep the warfare going.
As the war raged, different gods assisted different humans, finding themselves on opposing sides and hurting each other. Zeus then called a halt, ordering the gods to keep out of the mortals' fighting. But when Mars avowed to avenge the death of his demigod son Ascalaphus, who was born of a human mother, Jove, aka Zeus, changed his mind. Between Mars's emotional disregard of his order and the fact that the demigod Achilles was fighting alongside the Achaeans, Jove reversed his order and then retreated to Mount Olympus to look on in peace.
Until about 150 years ago, in 1870, when a businessman named Heinrich Schliemann financed the dig at a certain mound in eastern Turkey, a mound that had been identified by Charles Maclaren in 1822. The Battle of Troy and Troy itself were long thought of as fantasy and legend. It is now accepted that the Battle of Troy actually took place about 3,000 years ago in the 13th century BC. It was then, according to the Greeks, that gods and men fought side by side.
In such beliefs, the Greeks were not alone. Until archaeologists began uncovering their ancient sites, the Hittites and their ancient kingdom Hatti were only known to us from biblical references. Today, we trace their origins to the 2nd millennium BC, when Aryan tribes began migrating from the Caucasus area, some southeast to India, others southwest to Asia Minor. The Hittites flourished around 1750 BC and began their decline 500 years later. It was at that time that the Hittites spoke of invaders from across the Aegean Sea. They called the invaders the people of Achaeoi, the very Achaeans Homer wrote about in the Iliad.
For centuries prior to the Trojan War, the Hittites expanded their area to imperial proportion upon the orders of their god Teshub, the Stormer. Hittite kings claimed that Teshub had actually participated in the battle.
The mighty storm god, my lord, showed his divine power and shot a thunderbolt,
helping to defeat the enemy. Also aiding the Hittites was the goddess Ishtar, who we remember from the adventures of King Gilgamesh. She was lady of the battlefield, and her divine power brought many victories as she
came down from the skies to smite the hostile countries.
As reported in the Old Testament, the Hittites' influence extended south into Canaan. They were settlers of the area, not conquerors. The Egyptian pharaohs who sought to extend their rule northward to Canaan and the cedar lands of Lebanon had a different attitude. In 1470 BC, they defeated a coalition of Canaanite kings at Megiddo. While the Old Testament and inscriptions of Hittite foes picture the Hittites as expert chariot warriors, Hittite inscriptions suggest that they only went to war on the word of their gods. Once a war was won, however, the Hittites were satisfied to receive tribute and take captives, cities were not ransacked, and the population was not massacred. But Thothmes III, the pharaoh who was victorious at the Battle of Megiddo, said in his inscriptions,
"Now his majesty went north, plundering towns and laying encampments to waste."
It was all done, the pharaoh wrote, on the word of Amon-Ra, his god. Amon-Ra was a son of Enki.
The god Ammon, to whose battle orders the Egyptians attributed their viciousness, found his match in the God of Israel. We learn from the Bible in the words of the prophet Jeremiah.
Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, I will punish Ammon, god of Thebes, and those who trust in him, and shall bring retribution upon Egypt and its gods, its pharaohs and its kings.
This was an ongoing confrontation from 1,000 years earlier in the days of the Exodus, when Yahweh, the God of Israel, aka the Sumerian Enlil, smote Egypt with a series of afflictions as judgment against all the gods of Egypt.
Many of us are familiar with the biblical tale of the Exodus, where the direct intervention of Yahweh ensured the Israelites' discharge from bondage in Egypt.
And Yahweh went forth before them, by day in a pillar of cloud to lead the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light.
And when the Israelites were trapped by the sea as the Egyptians pursued them,
Yahweh drove back the sea with a strong east wind all that night, and the waters separated. And he stunned the Egyptian camp and loosened the wheels of their chariots, making their driving difficult. And the Egyptians said, Let us flee from the Israelites, for Yahweh fighteth for them against Egypt.
but the Egyptian ruler ordered the chariots to press on.
And the waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen.
The biblical language is almost identical to the words of a later pharaoh, Ramses II, in describing the miraculous appearance of Amon-Ra at his side during a battle with the Hittites in 1286 BC. Inscribed on temple walls, Ramses details how in the midst of the Hittites' victory, he found himself alone and blocked off by 2,500 Hittite chariots. He then turned to his god, reminding him that he was in this dilemma because he had followed the god's orders. He also reminded the god that the enemy was beholden to other gods. He went on pleading to his god, Amon, to save him, and then a miracle happened. Amon-Ra showed up on the battlefield.
Amon heard when I called him. He stood by me and called out, "Forward, forward, Ramses, beloved of Amon, I am with thee."
Under the influence of the god, the Hittites were inexplicably disabled.
Their hands dropped to their sides. They were unable to shoot their arrows nor raise their spears.
And Ramses managed to escape. While many years ago, tales such as these would be beyond our rational explanation, today, weapons such as the military-directed energy weapon is designed to do exactly what was done to the Hittites.
Okay, the source for this episode is Zecharia Sitchin's Wars of Gods and Men, the third book in his Earth Chronicles series. Was it the gods that taught us to war amongst ourselves? In our next episode, we'll continue to look at these gods, their wars, and the humans that have shaped history as we don't know it. Before closing the day, let's revisit this theme of knowing who we are. For any of us who took the suggestion from the last episode to listen to any of the hundreds of millions of near-death experiencers across the planet, you have undoubtedly stepped into a reality far beyond that of the physical world we experience in our everyday lives. You've heard the experiences of being out of the body, traveling effortlessly to other locations, even other dimensions, seeing light beings or seeing deceased family, friends, or religious figures of their personal belief system, of having a life review, of being in a presence of love beyond comprehension, of watching from above as rescuers or doctors attend to the body, of having no particular concern for the body they were watching, and of sometimes having a choice whether or not to return to that body. You heard these individuals describe how the experience changed their lives, no longer fearing death, and more deeply understanding the physical and non-physical worlds, the oneness of humanity, and the oneness of their infinite self with the infinite. Deep flyers, this is our reality. What a place to be. These near-death experiencers are the reporters asked to share their experience with the rest of us. They present us with a paradigm shift in understanding who we are. They present us with a choice to take a leap in consciousness, a choice to step into our power, a choice that stands before us whenever we are ready to make it. They help us close the gap between what our best science is telling us and the stories of ancient and indigenous people that we so easily dismiss as fantasy or delusion. In this time of tumultuous change here on planet Earth, We are presented with an opportunity to take an evolutionary leap in the advancement of our species. It is to our greatest benefit to recognize who we are and from where our power comes. Our power does not exist outside of us. Our power comes from within. The kingdom is within you. You are a most powerful being, and love is your most powerful tool. You are spiritually or energetically connected to all that is, never ever alone, and eternal. Stand in your power and move as it guides you. Know who you are and roll with your power. All right. How's that to pep up your day? Love is the fundamental force of creation. Keep a smile in your heart and share it with everyone ready to receive it. It is much needed. The light in me honors the light in you. And congratulations to the Philadelphia Eagles, who from the birth city of our great democracy took to prophetic flight to thoroughly defeat the Red Hats. I appreciate you guys. Be safe out there. Namaste.